Hello, world history students. Let me get over here to the right slide. All right, we need to pick up where we left off last Friday. We have been talking about World War II. We went through the Axis advances, which were Poland. They conquered Poland in September of 1939. That's what prompted Britain and France to join the war against Germany. Remember, Axis powers are Japan, Italy, Germany. So Germany attacks Poland. Then Germany attacked the Scandinavian countries and conquered most of those. Then we had the fall of France, and that's when we talked about the miracle at Dunkirk. And then they invaded North Africa. Remember, Italy invaded Algeria, and they'd already taken control of Ethiopia. So they're working their way through North Africa. Those were the great things according to the Axis powers that they did correctly at the beginning of World War II. Then we had a few of the blunders, and this is where we had left off. We were partway through these. We had the Battle of Britain, which proved to be disastrous for Germany because they were not successful. They wasted a lot of manpower and planes trying to conquer London and then ended up having to give up. We also had their invasion of Russia, which we talked about how that was not a good idea because the German soldiers got stuck in Russia in the cold winter. The loss of life there was enormous. And then we were about to talk about this one, the attack on Pearl Harbor. So Hideki Tojo was the mastermind behind this. Japan had signed a non-aggression pact with Russia, saying they were not going to attack each other. So Japan thought that the only people they had to worry about was the United States. And if they could just get them under control, get us under control, then they would be fine and they would be able to conquer all of the Pacific area. But in the fall of 1941, Hirohito, who was the emperor of Japan, appointed Tojo to be in charge of the military. He's pictured here, you see in his military uniform. And Tojo is basically, he's going to act like he's emperor, but he's not. Hirohito is still emperor. And he will take over and he will be the mastermind behind the plot to bomb Pearl Harbor. It was a surprise attack. President Roosevelt, the American president at the time, called it a date that will live in infamy. That's where that phrase comes from. It's from Franklin Roosevelt. Infamy meaning infamous, famous for all the wrong reasons. Okay, because of that attack, more than 2,000 Americans died at Pearl Harbor. 2/3 of our aircraft were destroyed, as well as 5 battleships and 3 cruisers that were either partially damaged and able to be repaired after extensive work, or they were lost entirely. But there were a couple of good things that came out of this. The reason that we actually call this a blunder. Congress in America here is forced to declare war on Japan. When we declare war on Japan as Americans, then Germany turns around and declares war on us. So now we're at war with both, with all the Axis powers. But the reason that this is bad is that, as far as for the Axis goes, is they have now pulled America into the war when America was quite content to stay out of it. But now that we're in it to win it. So we're going to do everything we can to win this war. The second reason that this was a bad move for the Axis is that all of our aircraft carriers, those enormous ships that hold airplanes, were out at sea when the Pearl Harbor attack happened. So none of our aircraft carriers were destroyed. Had they been, it would have taken us much longer to mobilize and get back into this war. So Japan woke a sleeping giant is the phrase that we're going to use there. And they didn't destroy our aircraft carrier. But now Germany and Italy have declared war on the U.S. Here are some pictures from Pearl Harbor. Okay, now I moved this map here so because the next thing we're going to talk about is North Africa, and I just want you to get an idea of the lay of the land. Notice Sicily. I don't have a pointer, so I can't use it. Oh, nope, my pointer takes me to the next slide. Okay, so let me go back here. All right, Sicily's right here. You need to know where that is because we're going to talk about it in just a minute. Italy, you know it's the boot shape. But we're going to talk about American forces are going to land over here in this area near Morocco. They're going to work their way across. British forces are going to land over here in Egypt because Egypt is a colony of Britain at the time. They're going to work their way this way. So those are part of what we're going to be talking about next. And I wanted you to have a map outlay idea before we go on to that. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Allied advances. What are the Allies going to do right and to gain ground and get this war over with? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move across North Africa. Remember, the Italians had already conquered Ethiopia and Algeria, or part of Algeria. And then they were working into Egypt because they wanted to get control of the Suez Canal and the oil that was there in the Middle East. The Italians had a hard time with getting that land. So the Germans sent in their best general, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, to help get control of that land. So he starts helping get control of North Africa. And again, it's a great spot to get oil. And that's what the armies are needing right now, most of all. So they're working in there, and the Axis powers are doing a lot of things. They're doing a lot of things right, and they're taking land. But then Britain sends in a man named Bernard Montgomery. He is one of the best generals Britain has ever produced. And he starts working his way from Egypt back across towards the west, across North Africa. And about that same time, Dwight Eisenhower, who is in charge of the American troops, lands in Morocco, and he starts pushing east. So they're going to push from either side and hopefully squeeze the Axis troops out of North Africa. 1942 is when this happens. This is a pivotal year for the war. 1942 will be the year that is the turning point for the Allies, when everything starts going our way. Okay? 1942. Okay. So we end up with victory in Africa. As soon as we are able to squeeze all those forces out, all the forces of Italy and Germany are leaving North Africa. They head to Sicily, that island that the boot of Italy is kicking. Okay, so they're heading there, and the Italian citizens are not happy. They are livid. They're fed up with Mussolini. They want him gone. And as soon as they land in Sicily in July of 1943. And by September, just a month and a half later, Italy surrenders. And because they don't want to fight. They don't want any part of this war. It was all with Mussolini. So Mussolini is thrown in jail. We'll get to the last point here in just a minute. He's thrown in prison. And but the German troops don't take that surrender. Italy has surrendered, but the German troops are going to keep fighting in Italy. So the German troops actually they take Mussolini out of the prison, and they put him in the German controlled area of Italy, and they let him be in charge of the government there. But then he is captured by partisans, which are people who present as one side, but they're really another side. They looked like they were Italian soldiers, but they were really Italian freedom fighters, in a way of speaking. So Mussolini is captured, and he is eventually executed. He is shot, he and his friends, shot and then hung upside down at a gas station in Milan. So he came to a very unlikely end, I guess is a good way to put that. Okay. We will move on to Normandy. Normandy is the next one. The Allies meet at several different conferences along the way. They had Churchill and Roosevelt had met at Casablanca, which is in northern Africa. And then Stalin joined them for a meeting later on in Tehran, which is in Iran, meeting to plan out what is the next move for us to get rid of the Axis powers, to bring them down. So at these meetings, they begin to plan what will become known as the Normandy invasion, Operation Overlord. That is its code name, okay? Operation Overlord. The plan was to deceive the Germans, to let information out that the attack was going to happen in one area. Because remember, we just talked about the Allies working their way up the boot of Italy. When you get up to the top of the boot of Italy, what do you do? What do you hit? The Alps. Very, very tall mountains. And there's Switzerland right there, which is neutral. They can't go through Switzerland. They'd have to go around, and it's all Alps. So there's really not a good way to do that. So even if those troops made it all the way up through, they can't continue to free France and to get rid of Hitler by going up Italy. So they've got to start a second front coming down from Britain. So they're going to deceive the Germans, and that day happens on June 6th, 1944. And since we are running close on time, I don't want to get into this too much. We will pause here, and we will pick up with D-Day tomorrow. Have a good day.